let's be honest. Is your company's hackathon really about profit, or is it more about the free pizza? Well, today we're going to break down the playbook for how you can transform your next hackathon from, a chaotic gamble into a truly strategic, high-return investment.
Okay, I want you to think back to the last hackathon you were at, or maybe just one you heard about. What comes to mind? Was it a blur of free pizza, some cool prizes, and just a whole lot of frantic last-minute coding? Yeah, that stereotype exists for a reason. And it really makes you ask the question, are these things actually delivering any lasting value, or are they just a really expensive, fun weekend?
So, really, this is about the two different paths a hackathon can take. On one side, you've got the familiar scene, right? A fun, chaotic burst of energy. But on the other side, that's the real goal. A strategic investment that actually generates tangible growth for the business. And you know what the difference maker is? It isn't the amount of coffee everyone drinks. It's the quality of the strategy that you put in place before the event even starts.
Okay, so let's talk about the risk here, because it's real. If you don't have a clear strategy, a hackathon can become a massive gamble. We're talking a huge investment of time, money, people, with absolutely zero guarantee of a return. So many companies just walk away with a few half-baked ideas and a really big bill to pay. So what exactly is a hackathon anyway? Let's make sure we're on the same page. At its core, it's this super high-intensity collaboration, where you get all these different teams together and they're just racing against the clock to solve a problem. It's kind of like a pressure cooker for ideas, right? The whole point is to crank out a creative prototype in a super short amount of time.
Now, the potential upside here is huge. I mean, you can fast-track skill development, spark some really genuine innovation, and build incredible new connections. But, and this is a big but, the pitfalls are just as real. We're talking serious workplace stress, brilliant ideas that just get forgotten the next day, and that constant nagging question of, was this even worth it? That right there, that's the heart of the hackathon gamble. If you don't manage these risks, the negatives can completely swallow up any of the positives.
So, how do you beat the odds? How do you win this gamble? Well, it all comes down to laying a strategic foundation. And here's the secret, okay? A successful hackathon has almost nothing to do with what happens on the day of the event. Seriously, your success or your failure, it's pretty much decided way back in the planning phase, long before anyone writes a single line of code.
All right, so research points to 3, let's call them core management mechanisms that are just crucial for success. First up is relational brokering. Just think of it like strategic matchmaking. You got to make sure you've got the right mix of people in the room. Engineers, designers, business folks, you name it. Second is contextual configuring. That's a fancy way of saying you need to give the teams the tools they need to actually succeed, like access to data, APIs, or maybe some mentors. And finally, you've got legitimacy building. This one's huge. It's all about getting buy-in from the higher-ups so that everyone sees the hackathon as a serious strategic initiative and not just a fun little distraction. These 3 things, they're the pillars of your whole strategy. There's this quote from Tauber that I just love because it totally reframes how you should think about this. It says, the event is like a pit stop on a long journey. See, a hackathon isn't the finish line. It's not where the problem just gets magically solved. No, it's a pit stop, a quick, intense, focused burst of work on a much, much longer journey toward a real solution. Thinking about it that way really helps manage everyone's expectations and keeps the effort focused on what matters.
And that brings you to your first really big strategic choice. What kind of event is this going to be? Is it a fierce competition where teams are just battling it out to be the last one standing? Or is it more about cooperation, kind of like everyone building a bridge together towards one common goal? You have to decide this up front, because that one decision, it's going to shape everything else. We're talking the rules, the judging criteria, even the whole vibe in the room. Get this wrong, and you're already way off course.
All right, so you've laid the foundation. Now it's time to actually execute the playbook for the event itself. This is all about the step-by-step flow that makes sure all that amazing energy gets channeled productively, instead of just turning into chaos.
See, any well-run hackathon follows a pretty clear structure. You kick things off with a welcome session that really sets the stage. And this part is absolutely crucial. You establish a non-negotiable code of conduct to make sure it's a safe and respectful space for everyone. From there, you move into the fun stuff, idea pitches, team formation, then that big, intense development phase. And it all leads up to the final pitches where the teams get to show off everything they've built. Okay, here's a pro tip for you. This is one of those things that really separates the great hackathons from the just okay ones. Don't just tell your teams to go brainstorm. Honestly, it's just not enough.
If you want truly innovative results, you have to give them some kind of structured method to guide their thinking all the way from problem to solution.
And one of the absolute best frameworks for this is called design thinking. It's basically a 5-step process. You start by empathizing, really getting into the user's shoes and understanding their pain points. Then you define the core problem you're actually trying to solve. Only then do you get to ideate, or brainstorm solutions. After that, you build a quick prototype, and finally, you test it. This whole cycle is designed to make sure teams are building something people actually want, not just something that's, technically cool.
Here's a fatal mistake I see teams make all the time. They spend 99% of their energy coding and maybe like 1% thinking about their final pitch. But here's the deal. In a hackathon, your presentation is just as critical as the thing you built. The judges are really looking for 4 key things. Is the premise original? Is the practice viable? Like, could this actually work in the real world? Is there that wow factor that makes them sit up and pay attention? And finally, does it actually align with the challenge that was set in the first place?
Okay, we've now reached what is, frankly, the biggest failure point for most hackathons, and that's proving it was all worth it. Because at the end of the day, if you can't measure your return on investment, how are you ever going to justify doing it again? So, the event's over. Everyone's tired but happy. How do you actually prove to your stakeholders that it worked? It's not about the cool photos you post online. It's about measuring 2 things, the cold, hard data and the real human impact.
Yeah, to really get the full picture, you've got to look at both types of metrics. On the one hand, you have the quantitative stuff, the hard numbers that tell you about efficiency and business impact. And on the other, you have the qualitative side. That's the human impact, which measures things like perception, what people learned, and the long-term value. So let's dive into some of those hard numbers. What should you be tracking? Well, things like the number of viable prototypes that came out of it. And maybe most importantly, what percentage of those ideas actually get implemented later on. You can even track things like cost reductions that came from the solutions. Or if you're using it for recruiting, you can compare the cost of the hackathon to what you'd normally pay a recruiter. That's a powerful number. Now, for the human side of things, one of the most powerful tools you can use is the Net Promoter Score, or NPS. It's so simple. It's just one question. On a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this hackathon to a colleague? That one little number gives you an amazing snapshot of how satisfied people were and how much value they felt they got out of it.
So let's bring this all home. When you focus on these 3 things, strategy, execution, and measurement, you can take your hackathon from being just a fun one-off event and turn it into a repeatable, high-value strategic asset for your entire organization.
Because here's the crucial point, right? A successful hackathon is a strategic tool, not just a technical event. Its success has less to do with the coding skills in the room and way more to do with the strategic planning that happens before, during, and especially after the event is over.
And that really leaves us with one final question for you to think about. Your next hackathon, is it just going to be another memorable event with some pizza and prizes? Or are you going to build it from the ground up to be a true strategic game changer? The choice, really, is yours.